There is no need to explain how important tactics and combinations are in chess. They are vital, they are unavoidable, and sooner or later you have to have tactics in every chess game that was played. Not all of them, not in all of them tactics were used, but tactics are used in your mind when you go, when you make certain move, you anticipate certain tactics for you or for your opponent. And there are a lot of books that explain about tactics, and I saw like dozen books where it's explain tactics by the themes. For example, there is a theme on a pin, or there is a theme on a back rank mate. And there are a lot of examples. It's very helpful. It's very good that there is one thing only. What I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to find what, once you look at the chapter in the book and it says, oh, there is a back rank mate examples, and there come 20 or 30 of them, and you see this one, oh, there is a, immediately you're concentrating on a back rank. So there is, you get huge hint even before you try to find the combination, which you never get in the game when you play the game. Now, I'm trying to explain how to find tactics when you don't know what the theme, what the combination, on what square, and why it should be there. Everything in tactics is logical, most of it. Sometimes it's the combination comes from just one move shot. It's just on uh, without any logical preparation. But most of the combination, I would say 95%, they have logical explanation for them. So you have to analyze position in your head, and you see where is what is the weakness of the opponent, and what can I use, such as a pin? This pin is little suspicious. Maybe I can take advantage of it. So it's very important to recognize this point. Very important for playing these tactics and for preventing it if it's against you. So always try to be analytical and see why this or that tactic should be there. I should search. You never you are not going to find 100% solution every time, because sometimes you see there is a weak point, and I think if I go there I can kill him or I can find the winning combination, but sometimes it's very close and it's not there. So at least you know what direction to look for. But if you know what the theme is going to be, and for example, if they tell you there is mate in 3 here, anybody can find them very quick. But when you play the game, some top players missed very simple solutions. And why? Because they have to come to this conclusion by themselves. So it's very important to analyze position, which will help you a great deal in finding or preventing certain tactical certain combinations. It's going to be very useful to watch. Let's look at one of the games of true genius of attack of Mikhail Tal. This game was played in 1959. d4, knight f6 against Swedish players Sven Johannesson. c4, c6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, g6, bishop f4, bishop g7, e3, very quiet opening, and see how quickly it becomes very sharp and tactical. Castle, bishop e2, c5, d takes c, queen a5. Now we have very well known position of Grunfeld defense where white has an extra move, bishop e2. Bishop supposed to be on f1. And the reason why, because black, instead of playing c7, c5, they played c6 first, and then they played c5. So white has an extra tempo in this position, and they castled. D takes c, bishop takes c4, queen takes c5, and knight to e5. After knight e5, knight bd7, white made here very interesting decision. Bishop takes f7, rook takes f7, knight takes f7, king takes f7. Well, either very strong player can give in this position two pieces for rook, or very weak. I don't think we had a very weak player here, both was because it was Mikhail Tal, and he played, so he practically envisioned that white can develop initiative where his black's pieces will not be able to overcome. And queen b3 check, king f8, rook ac1. You see how quickly rooks come into the play, and there are two open files, c and d, one for each rook. Rook a to c1, a6, rook f to d1, queen a5, and queen to c4. Well, how to develop now? Queen f5 was played here. After h3, knight e8. Black is trying to play knight df6 and develop finally light square bishop. After knight e8, knight d5 was played. And now the threat is, if knight d to f6 is knight b6 threat. So what black played queen e6 first, and after queen b4 they played b5. You see white's position, white's pieces are in overwhelmingly developed here, and there should be, its position is totally ripe for tactical shots. So rook c6 is coming next move, and queen f7. Obviously, if queen takes c6, white wins quickly. They can win at least a queen by queen takes e7, king g8, queen takes e8 check, followed by knight e7 check. Queen takes e6 cannot be played in this position, so queen f7. And after queen f7, knight c7. And after knight takes c7, rook takes c7, black is totally paralyzed. And what was played here, queen e6 back. Rook d to c1. Now bishop on c8 is hanging. Knight b6 is forced. And now rook takes e7. And queen takes e7, bishop d6, simple combination. And now knight d5 was met by beautiful refutation. Rook takes e6, knight takes b4, and now bishop d6 check, winning the knight. And interestingly, white can win b4 knight and save e6 rook, because on king f7, rook e7 check and taking the knight on b4, and king g8 is the same because of rook e8 check, king f7, rook e7 check, followed by bishop takes b4. This is tremendous example and very, very instructive example of activity of the pieces and combinations based on this activity. So normally what white did there, white gave two minor pieces for knight and a bishop. It's almost never recommended. However, in that position, black never had a chance to complete their development and practically were swept off the board. Well, the game I want to show you now is very, very, very instructive also. And in my opinion, it's one of the best games played, one of the deepest game in attack played. It was played by Garry Kasparov, and Garry Kasparov was black in this position. What he played against Beliavsky, d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, bishop g7. That was very popular at that time variation of Grunfeld defense, and Beliavsky had many powerful games won with this variation. Of course, queen b3, d takes c, queen takes c4, castle e4, knight a6, bishop e2, c5, d5, e6, and now bishop g5. E takes d. This was very well known to both players. E takes d, and in this position, instead of e takes d, which is one of the moves, knight takes d5 was played by Beliavsky. Bishop e6, castled long. Position is razor sharp, and it looks like white is threatening with potential e5. Black played bishop takes d5, rook takes d5, and queen b6. And that was home preparation by Beliavsky, and I am sure Kasparov was prepared for it as well. Bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, e5, queen f5, bishop d3, queen c8, and rook d1. Now, let's talk about this position. This position is very sharp because white has beautifully placed pieces, and also they threaten to develop instant attack on the king side. But black has potentially very strong bishop, so if the diagonal opens somehow, bishop will be very powerful. And also they have possibilities for attack on their own. So b5 was played. Actually, obviously queen takes b5 will be met by knight c7. Queen h4 was played. Knight b4. And bishop takes g6. Very interesting tactical shot. I cannot be 100% sure, but I think it was still part of the opening preparation. F takes g, and now rook d7. Now white, which was Beliavsky, has only one pawn for a piece, for a knight, but threatening knight g5, very powerful threat, and on h6 maybe even rook takes g7. Threatening, the main threat of course is queen e7 with inevitable mate, and black is totally in defensive. Queen e8 was played by Kasparov, and I suspect this could have been all home preparation. In either case, I think it's one of the most powerful games I have ever seen. And Queen E8 was a lot deeper move that I could even suspect when I was looking at this game. Queen E8, just defending the mating threat, and after Rook E7, it still looks like on Queen C6, Rook D7 is coming. And looks like this is it. Looks like black is in a lot of trouble. But of course, this was anticipated by Kasparov. And now, series of very powerful tactical shots. First one, bishop h6 check. Obviously, queen cannot take bishop because rook is hanging. And you see how black's seemingly passive pieces become overwhelming pieces in very few moves. King b1, rook d8. All of a sudden, we see on rook takes queen, there will be checkmate on the other side of the board. So queen is untouchable. So what after rook d8, rook d6 was played. And now queen c6 move. Another powerful move. For the same reason, rook cannot take the queen. And if queen takes the bishop, then white gets mated after queen e4 check. All of a sudden, black's mating threats become very, very real and very difficult to overcome them. After queen c6, a3 was played. And rook takes d6, ed, and queen takes d6. And after a takes b, c takes b, white is helpless here. Because what happens here, black is threatening queen d1 check, followed by b3 check, and white's king is in a lot of trouble. Meanwhile, bishop is still untouchable because rook is hanging, and here white is totally lost. Queen e4 was played, b3, threatening queen d1 mate, and after knight d4, simply rook f4, attacking queen, attacking knight, queen a8 check, bishop f8, and white has no defense. Knight is hanging, king is in a lot of trouble. They don't even have simple check in this position. White resigned. That's a very, very powerful attack, practically from nowhere, practically from the position where it seems like you have to be in total defense and you have to survive somehow, maybe even by giving material not to get mated. All of a sudden, this powerful attack emerged from nowhere. Now I want to show you the game which was played by me in 1972, back when I lived in Soviet Union. And this game is one of my most memorable games because I think it's very original too, because the attack was played in this game was almost all forced, and I did not even expect how powerful this attack would be when I played. So knight f3, knight f6. By the way, game was for current American GM who was also lived in Soviet Union, then Lev Albert. d4, c5, d5, b5, c4, g6. This is well known Volga gambit or Benko gambit. G6, cb, a6, b6. This is declined Volga gambit. We don't want to go much into the opening theory here, b6 d6, knight c3, knight b d7, b7, bishop takes b7, e4, bishop g7, bishop e2, castling and castling, queen c7, bishop f4, rook a to b8, queen d2, bishop to c8, opening the b file, rook f to e1, queen a5, rook a to b1, knight b6, and here I played e5, knight h5, bishop h6. Now let's talk about this position. What I want actually is to play bishop takes g7 and maybe later open the d file and go with a knight, creating attack, and knight on h5 is also in trouble. So black's move is very logical. Knight may be a dangerous piece in white's attack on the king's side, but if they take this knight, bishop will not be as dangerous. But amazingly, what black wants is bishop takes f3, and amazingly they never have a chance to play bishop takes f3. They never have time for it. So what happened here? Bishop takes g7, knight takes g7, e takes d, and point, you cannot take on f3 because d takes e7 with the tempo. So black plays e takes d. Now b4, again no time to take on f3. b4, the idea is to free the knight, that knight is pinned, that queen cannot take queen. So what we play, b4, c takes b, now knight e4. Again bishop cannot take on f3 because black gets mated in 2 moves, and queen h6 and mate next move. So there is no time to take the knight on f3. So after knight e4, f5 was played. And again, queen h6, there is no time for bishop f3 because knight g5 now. And the same mating threat is winning for white. So after queen to h6, black is practically lost here. What they did, they played knight e8, knight f to g5. You see, black never had a chance to take the knight on f3, and now this knight delivering a final blow to black's position. Rook b7, knight e6, attacking the rook on f8, rook f7, bishop takes g4, f takes g, and now simple fork, little unorthodox way to fork 2 black rooks. Knight d8, knight takes d5, knight takes b7, rook takes b7, and now I played knight c5. It's a good move because we're attacking the knight and attacking the rook and attacking the knight on e8. And after knight c5, rook e7, knight e6. Actually, very well played attack by white. Now threatening queen f8, mate, knight g7, knight takes g7, rook takes g7, and now rook e8 check, king f7, rook b to e1. What happens here, the black's rook is totally out of the game, and black is totally lost. Queen takes a2, then queen g5, and there is no defense to rook to e7 with a checkmate, and black resigned in this position. There is a forced mate. So a very well played attack, and the reason why it happened because too many of black's pieces were on a queen side, and black's king did not have sufficient support. Some of the top positional players, they are and they were always very, very good in tactics. And there is an explanation for that. A lot of people have wrong impression that positional player plays positional chess, so they are good in positional chess, and tacticians are very good in tactics only. That's not true. Some of the most important element of ingredients of positional play is realizes how pieces work together and where tactical shot can be. So that's how they find it. So, well, let's look at some beautiful combinations played by such a positional players as Anatoly Karpov and Tigran Petrosyan. Here is the game played by Karpov in 1981 against Jan Timman, very famous grandmaster. So the game was played in 1981 in Moscow tournament. C4, C5, very quiet opening. Knight F3, Knight C6, E3, Knight F6, Knight C3, E6. You see it's symmetrical. For now, D4, D5. Karpov is white here. C takes D. And it's interesting to point here that if black took with a pawn, that eventually black would have had some kind of isolated pawn position. But what happened is black, after c takes d, black took with the knight, and it turned out that white ended up with isolated pawn position. Bishop d3, bishop e7, castle and castle, a3, c takes d, e takes d, and bishop f6. With the move transposition, we got a very well known position of so-called Caro-Kann defense. But we don't want to go into details of the opening. And let's see what happened after bishop f6. It's theoretical move. Bishop e4. This is all theory. Knight c to e7. Queen d3. And h6 was played. I personally prefer g6 in this position. But h6 was played. This is also theoretical move. Knight e5. Knight takes c3. If white takes with a pawn, then after bishop takes e5, an exchange of queens, black is going to have equal position. So Karpov played queen takes c3, knight f5, bishop to e3. It's still very quiet phase of the game. Bishop e3, knight d6, bishop to f3, bishop d7. Queen to b4, attacking the knight. Bishop b5, rook f to e1, a5, queen to b3. You see, now white tries to conduct activity in the center and the king side. So their piece is better placed, however they have slightly isolated pawn on d4. Well, after queen b3, bishop a6 was played, rook a d1, and knight f5, bishop e4. Knight takes e3, queen takes e3. It's not much to comment for now. And black played queen d6 and were absolutely happy with their position. What they're gonna do now, play rook fd8, rook c8, and they are doing okay. However, white's next move shock this evaluation a little bit, shock Black's opinion. So what happened after Queen d6? Now that's what they want, and Bishop c2 creates threat of penetrating to h7. That's why I said I don't like to play h6 in the earlier stage when a bishop on e4 is alive. I rather shut this bishop by playing g6, but it's matter of opinion, matter of taste. After bishop c2, all of a sudden Black starts experiencing problems. g6 kind of creates more weaknesses. Pawn is hanging, and after queen e4 g6 will create some tactical threats for white. So what happened here, rook fd8, queen e4, and rook ac8, as we said. So Black tries to undermine queen h7 check, but that's what was played. King f8, and now Karpov played h3. Now that's not the best move. The best move is bishop b3, just what he did move later, and we see why this move is so powerful. h3, b6, and now white played bishop b3. You see, when white checks on h8, Black is going to have only one square on e7, but check at this point is not going to do anything. It doesn't do anything because immediately after this check the queen will be hanging. So what we need to go d5 and try to open the position and remove the knight, and then checkmating threat will be very, very powerful. Now, to find the combinations in this, bishop b7 was played. You have to notice what you want. Now, finding tactical shots. Okay, we can. There's many ways. A lot of people just go ahead and do it. We don't do tactic exercises here. I want to show you how you find combination in certain positions. You see the idea of queen h8, and you see the idea of opening the e-file. So you have to coordinate. You know you want to attack opponent's king, but there is no attack with only one queen. One queen cannot do anything unless you get these rooks and rest of the pieces participate. So d5 was played by white, and that should have been done bishop b3 and d5 instead of h3. But even now d5 is quite devastating. Obviously e takes d is not acceptable, loses immediately to knight d7 check, followed by queen h8 mate. So you know you have to open the d file, or you have the e file, I mean, or you have to open the d file where Black's queen is. So in order to get your pieces to play, you have to go d5. That's the way of thinking in those type of positions. What is there going for me? What do I have to do in order for my attack to be successful? So d5 is necessity. Queen c7. Now queen c7, and you have to be focused. Now all of a sudden you may see the, wait a minute, if I take on e6, he is gonna take my rook, and then he's gonna take my knight, and I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. I will be pieced down. Well, this is the negative thinking. Now the way you should think here, you should concentrate not to see glass as half empty. You have to see it as half full. So when you go d5 and after queen c7, you keep concentrating on your plan of checkmating king or opening position for the king. So d takes e was played by Karpov, rook takes d1, and now, of course, not rook takes d1 because queen will take on e5. But what was played by white is knight g6 check, and that leads to a forced mate. King e8 is, of course, unacceptable because checkmate in one move. So black is forced to take, and amazingly the pinned rook on e1 does the job. Now white will go e7 check. So that's what I mean, pinned rook gets the job because king cannot take on e7. So bishop cannot take on e7 either because of queen g8 checkmate. So the only move left for white is for black is king e8, and then there is a forced mate quickly, queen g8, king d7. Actually, it's not difficult at all to calculate. It may be long variation, but black, you never leave your opponent a choice, an option. Queen e6 check, king e8, queen f7 check, king d7, and now e8 double check, and you see white is mating black and winning all their material. So that's gonna be the end of the game. So after knight g6, of course Steven saw all this, and black simply resigned. Very, very good example of coordinating attack. And remember, the positional player, any good positional player, they will find these combinations. And the reason why they will find, because they will see, they have trained eye on how the pieces coordinate and what is the weak point of opponent's position, and they see it quick. Otherwise they wouldn't be a good positional player. Positional player, it's not always about maneuvering. It's seeing dynamics and see how pieces work together, and that's what distinguishes between just average player and good positional player. Positional players see those themes very quickly. Now this is the game in a World Championship finals between Tigran Petrosyan and Boris Spassky. Now this Tigran Petrosyan is anything but tactical player, but you see how well he uses tactics and how we should find these tactics and why Petrosyan was playing such a sharp continuations. This is going to be very interesting to follow. Knight f3, knight f6, g3, g6, c4, bishop g7. The regular King's Indian opening, bishop g2, castle by white, knight c6, knight c3, d6, d4, a6. Very well known position of King's Indian defense. d5, knight a5, knight d2, c5, queen c2, e5. Well, we don't want to go into detail discussing this opening, but this position was played multiple times. So b3, so knight g4, e4, f5. Black starts activity in the early stage. Before white finished development all their pieces and brought the pieces here. So black played f5, and here of course white does not want to allow f4, and then they will be under the pressure for the rest of the game, under the pressure on the king side. So ef was played, gf, and knight to d1. The purpose of knight to d1 is to go f4 and later knight e3. Well, black could have played bishop b2 first, but knight d1 is one of the possibilities. b5. Now, black plays on both sides of the board. Can this be recommended? I don't think so. f3, e4 was played by Spassky. Well, he didn't want to simply remove the knight because white would have played bishop b2 and later on brought all these pieces. Maybe it was the better choice. e4 was played, attacking the rook on a1. And after e4, bishop b2, e takes f, bishop takes f3, bishop takes b2, queen takes b2, knight e5, bishop e2. And in this position, I believe Spassky was behind in the match and he needed to win this game. Let's talk about this position. What white wants to do actually, to go maybe knight e3 and knight g2 and put the knight on f4. So that is a very powerful position for the knight. Also, you have to notice weakness of f5 square. So, and very important detail, knight on a5. Knight on a5 is very lonely on a5, and it does not have any, it cannot be transferred to any good positions in any near future. So in this position, after black, after bishop e2, black played f4, and the idea of f4, of course, white took, and bishop to h3. Now, here, Petrosian is a good positional player. So what he did, obviously f takes e cannot be played because queen g5 and white is getting mated. Even positional players see mate in one. So what happened after bishop h3, white assessed position where the knight on a5 is critical. So white played a knight e3, bishop takes f1, rook takes f1, and now you can see that black is in a lot of trouble. Knight on e5 is hanging and can be taken next move. So knight was moved to g4, and here comes the tactics. That's how positional players are good. He played bishop g4, and you see that black cannot prevent bishop e6, and that should be deadly addition to white's attack, deadly point. So bishop g4, black cannot stop anymore, and what was played, knight takes f4. And this is so important move, bishop e6, that rook takes f4 was played. Now, if Spassky played this for white, we would understand. He has a great sense for initiative. But Petrosian, his positional sense is so good that he realizes that this position after rook takes f4, bishop e6 check, and rook f7. Of course, rook f7 has to be played because king f8 will be followed by queen h8 check. So rook f7 was played, and knight e4. You see, now white's piece is completely dominating position, and knight on a5 is very pitiful. So position is totally lost for black, and there is no defense. Queen h4 was played, knight takes d6, queen g5 check, king h1, and here after rook a to a7, there is a combination played by Petrosian. It's not very difficult, it's very cute, but the good top positional players, they don't miss it. The way you see it, rook on f7 is twice pin. How do you find, you average player, how do you find the combination here? Of course, it's deadly pin, and we should not be in a rush of taking this exchange. If we take it twice, we're going to have a big advantage because we have very strong pass pawn and material going to be even. But there is something after bishop takes f7, rook takes f7, something that we saw. For example, I saw these types of combinations when I was just starting to play chess and learning some basics. You see that there may be a fork with this knight. So queen h8 check gives up a queen and picks up a rook and the queen. So after king h8, knight takes f7, king g7, knight takes g5, it's all over. It's all over. So now white has an extra piece. Now, this game was not tactical. This was very well played positionally with imminent tactical solution. Tactical solution will be there, and that's how you find. So Petrosian saw very well the coordination of his minor pieces in this position. He saw very well coordination and queen on diagonal, and of course this tactical shot, I don't know if you can call it tactical, it's a very simple tactical shot, and that's what brought this game to the logical conclusion. So tactics are a lot easier to find, combinations are a lot easier to find if you deeply analyze weak points of your opponent and your strength of dynamics of your pieces. So this makes finding combinations very easy. Now, next game, I will show you that combination and tactics came from nowhere. The position was very quiet. The game was played between some top players in the world, between Anatoly Karpov and Veselin Topalov. And this game was played in 1994 in Spain. And d4, knight f6, very quiet development in the game. And you see how out of nowhere there came tactical shot in 2-3 moves all over. How do we find them? d5, e6, knight c3, e takes d, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, bishop e7, e4, castle, bishop e2. That's another move. The main move is bishop c4. There is move bishop f4. Well, bishop e2 was played by Karpov, very conservative continuation. d6, castle, knight c6, c3, bishop e6, queen h5. And after h6, rook d1. Well, this is quite position. White does not have much of an advantage, but they have very easy game. They're gonna go bishop f4, maybe double up. This is a plan and for a weakness, but black has a very good chance to play d5. So position is very close to equal. Rook e8, bishop f4, and bishop f8. Knight d2, g6, queen f3, and d5. So black gets rid of its weakness. Queen g3, queen e7, e takes d, bishop takes d5. Now we got symmetrical pawn structure, and after bishop f1, queen f6, knight b3 was played, rook a d8. Position now is equal. Rook d2, white tries to double rooks. Bishop e6, it's still very quiet position. Bishop c7, rook takes d2, knight takes d2. Now knight comes into play also. Bishop f5, knight c4, and rook e4 was played. I don't like this move because this move does not have anything to do with dynamics. Rook on e4 does not stand well. Knight e3, and now bishop c8, because that's not an open file now, and white captures the d file. In this position, I think white is slightly better. Rook e8, see, rook has to go back. Now h3. And there is no clear plan for either side because neither side has really weaknesses. Queen g5 was played by black, queen f3, king g7, bishop f4, queen e7, and now knight d5 was played. White has clear advantage now. White's pieces standing a lot better than black's, and the queen right now is in trouble. Queen h4 will be met by g3, and black is in trouble. They have to go queen to h5 and ruin their pawn structure. But Topalov intended, and he did play queen e4. And this, in this seemingly quiet position, there is a tactical shot that ends the game immediately. Well, immediately in several moves. So what did white do here? The shot is, let me see how we find this shot. Rather than show you right away, let's talk about how we, you see the f6 square. So you immediately start looking, can I take on h6 or take on f7? Well, but it doesn't look like I have too many threats. And also, I want somehow to get my queen on f6, but I cannot make a legal move. And f6 square, oh, wait a minute, but if I go knight f6, I am forking these two, but my knight is not protected. Oh, well, if my knight is not protected, he cannot take my queen because I take the rook first, and then I take the queen. Then he is gonna have to take. But if he takes with the king, then I have discover check. But discover check obviously is not good because queen is gonna take the queen unless it's double check. The double check like this is not gonna do anything because black can simply either go back or maybe even take on g5. But there is bishop e5 check, which blocks this, which disconnects black's rook and the queen, unless king takes the bishop, and king has to take the bishop, has to take it because on any other move black loses the queen. And then unexpectedly white exchanges the queen, And now what happens, there are only two pieces down. Only two pieces. Of course, it's a lot. It's more like ironical, but white wins here because they give rook check and king must move. King move to f5 and then take the rook and bishop. So they gave two pieces. They gave one piece back and rook back. So they win exchange, and game here is practically over. So rook takes e8, bishop e6, rook takes f8, bishop takes a2, and after rook c8, Topalov simply resigned here. Well, on the level they play, on the highest level, exchange in this type of positions is a very sufficient material advantage that the other side can resign. Also, in the hands of Karpov, this kind of advantage is obviously decisive. Now, next game I want to show you, it was very, very interesting. Also, I found combination there. It was my game playing against famous Filipino GM Eugene Torre, and I found this combination strictly because I believe in principles of chess. I believe they taught me that if your opponent's pieces stand terribly, you must find a combination. If you don't find a combination, you are not good in tactics. And if you look more and still don't find it, then you should ask for help. And I was very persistent in looking for it, and I found solution. Okay, let's quickly look at the game. Knight f3, c5, c4. I'm white here. g6, d4. It was in Argentina, played international tournament. C takes d. d4, actually bishop g7 was played. This e4, knight c6, d5, knight d4, knight takes d4, c takes d. Now in in this position I played knight a3. Idea is to go knight c2 and create pressure on d4 pawn. Queen b6, bishop d3, d6. And here, well, later I found out that that was a theory. But when I played in this position, I made a move I didn't know it was theoretical. Actually, it wasn't a theory, it was played once. It wasn't like established theory. In this position, I made a c5 move. It's very intuitive pawn sacrifice that gives a white, I think, very promising position. Well, black must take this pawn. They have two ways they can take it. If they take with the d pawn, I may go bishop b5 check, and then castle, and try to later on to develop an attack, keeping in mind that king is uncastled. Black's king, same thing would have happened if they played bishop d7 instead. I would have exchanged and king would have been in the center. So when I played c5, I was thinking, so either he takes with a pawn, then I will and then we're gonna play bishop b5, or queen takes, in which case we'll still go bishop b5. So we know that black will not be able to castle here. King f8, and we continue simply. White's pieces are not developed properly to start immediately active operation. Now we conclude development. Castle, knight f6, bishop goes back to d3, protecting the pawn, and also it's not good position for bishop to stand on d5. What I want to do is f4 and e5 to develop some kind of a attack on the king side. After bishop d3, I don't know, maybe the best try for black was h6, playing king g8 and king h7. But Tora played knight g4. Actually, on h6, I would have played bishop d2, rook c1, and I would have had sufficient compensation. Knight g4 was played, knight c4. Now I want to go b4, rook c1, and knight e5. Black is glad to exchange any pieces because after it's gonna be more difficult for white to develop a direct attack. Knight takes e5, bishop takes e5. Now if pawn takes on e5, then white goes rook c1, maybe queen c2, and they can develop strong pressure on a queen side even. Not to mention that f4 is another option and still open the f file. f4 guarantees white opening of the f file. So that's why black took with the bishop on e5, bishop h6 check, bishop g7, and queen d2. Now I just want to take over the c file, queen b6, and here I made, I think, one of the strongest moves I have ever made in my life. And this move is a little difficult to find right away, but if you think logically, how do you want to develop attack, then you will see how to find this move. I just don't want to show you this move. I want to show you what was the process that led to finding this move. Okay, let's talk about this position. There is no instant solution. There is no tactics. There is no... So what we have to do, we have to continue developing initiative. Where can black bishop be developed? Black bishop has to be developed, and it has only one square on d7. g4 doesn't count because after f3 it still has to go back. Bishop can only be developed on d7. But we can take this square away from the bishop, and that's why I played a4 move. a4 is very powerful move. And now why? If bishop goes to d7, then we go a5, and you see black's queen has to go back, and now white can simply enjoy better position with even pawns by playing bishop takes g7, king takes g7, and queen b4, attacking two pawns on b7, d4, and b7. So white has serious advantage here. So in black has to hold on to extra pawn by playing a5. They have to keep their queen on b6. But then bishop b5 takes that only square from the bishop away. And now white has to find a way to develop at least this rook. So they try to go e5. What they want is to go f6 and king f7. I could have played here bishop takes g7, king takes g7, followed by f4. It was actually my thought at first, but then I found something that gives white decisive advantage, probably just wins the game. Queen g5. All of a sudden, this is deadly move. And that's why, because the reason why, because all black's pieces are paralyzed, and we have here deadly threat of queen f6. So black well, if bishop takes h6, I want to point that queen takes h6, king g8, and f4. Black, there is no way black can last long in this position. f5, f6 is coming, fe is coming, opening the f file, and black is totally lost. But after king g8, that's what was played, and now king is boxed. King and rook should never stand like this. They should stand like this. And in the other order, cornered rook and king in trouble. Now queen e7 is very powerful blow in black's position, and they have no defense, because if bishop takes h6, bishop e8 develops the final blow in black's king's position, and black is about to get checkmated. Bishop takes h6 is not possible. On the other hand, bishop e8 is a threat, and we know bishop on d7 has no square. So what black did, played bishop d7. Then I simply played bishop takes g7, and now black loses a minor piece, because if they take on b5, I have several ways I can win the game. I can simply take a rook, and I'm gonna be a rook up, or I can simply go bishop h6, try to checkmate him. So after bishop takes g7, black resigned here, and I think it was very well played, conducted game, and the game ended in 20 moves without black having any chance for survival. That was an interesting game. Next game I want to show you was played by a player we all know and we all loved when he was active, Garry Kasparov. And this game was played in 1994. I believe it was played in 1994. Yes, and between Kazimjanov and Kasparov. Actually, it was played in not in 94. It was played in 2005. That was different game. I was remembering in 2005, and the game is. Was played very well known position, theoretical position, where Kasparov played some novelty, and you see how he blew his opponent off the board. That was very powerful game for on initiative. Kasparov is black and Kazimjanov is white. c4, c6, knight c3, knight f6. Knight f3, knight bd7, knight f3, no, actually e3, e6, knight f3, knight bd7, bishop d3, d takes c, bishop takes c4, b5, bishop d3. This is Miran variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. Bishop d3, bishop b7, castle, a6, e4, c5, d5, queen c7. I don't want to stop here. I don't want to keep going, because this is all very well known theory, and we don't want to pay attention to the opening. After queen c7, d takes e, f takes e, bishop c2, c4, knight d4, knight c5, bishop e3, e5, knight f3, bishop e7, and knight to g5. This is the move that was played trying to prevent black from castling, but that's what Kasparov did. Kazimjanov thought he would prevent him from castling, but then bishop takes c5 was played, bishop takes c5, and now white wins exchange. Of course, Kasparov saw it, but that was positional sacrifice. Queen b6, knight takes f8, and rook takes f8. Now you see black's idea. Black has all their pieces aiming on white's king side. An open f file, possibly bishop will go on d4 and b4. Also, that will add to their compensation. So knight d5 was played by Kazimjanov. Obviously, he didn't want to experience all this pressure. Bishop takes d5, ed, and bishop takes f2. Well, isn't it obvious that this is the point where black has to concentrate? This is the point black has to concentrate on. And bishop takes f2. Rook takes f2 is bad because of knight g4, and white is totally lost because rook on f2 cannot be protected. King h1 was played, and now e4. Actually, this is the position Kasparov went for. What is going to happen here? What is going to happen is pawn is going to go to e3, and bishop is going to stay on f2 for as long as he wants to. So, and white's position is totally smothered. White is in a lot of trouble here. After e4, I would say white may be lost. Queen e2, e3, rook f2 d1, queen d6 to block this pawn, and you see there is a queen is aiming on white's king side as well. a4, and now very good move made by Kasparov. What he wants to do, he has to bring knight into the action. Knight cannot go here, knight cannot go here. So, and g6 was played with the idea of knight h5. And knight h5 is a very powerful threat because knight h5 will be threatening maybe even knight g3 check, and if pawn takes, queen takes g3 followed by queen h4, some kind of lot of mating ideas here, not to mention knight f4 also. So Kazimjanov of course saw that, and he played 8 takes b, 8 takes b, and now he played g3. Knight goes to h5 anyway, queen g4, and now strictly calculation. Bishop takes g3. Now, because white's rook, you see, cannot be defending white's king, and pawn takes g3, knight takes g3, this is very powerful, and white is absolutely unconditionally lost here. What can be done? King g2 was played. But what would have happened on king g1? I'll show you. King g1 also, there is a forced win for white, for black here. e2, if that was played. On rook e1, there is a queen check on c5 or b6. On king h2 or king g2, it doesn't matter. Queen f2 check, and on king h3, knight f1. And you see there's a multiple mate threats, and white is absolutely hopeless. There is a check, there is maybe one more check, but there are no more checks, and the game is over. Rook f3 is coming, and there is no defense. So what happened, Kazimjanov played king g2 in this position. But king g2 also not a solution, because rook f2 check, king h3, knight f5, now threatening queen h2 mate. There is not much defense left. Rook h1, h5. what can white do? Rook a8 check doesn't do anything because king g7, rook a7, and king f6 or king h6. So Kazimjanov played in this position desperate queen takes g6 check, queen takes g6, rook h to g1, but then queen takes g1, rook takes g1, king f7. And we got to very quiet position where black has two extra pawns and white is totally hopeless. Bishop is hanging. If they take the knight, rook ending is hopeless, and so white resigned in this position. Very well played game, very well conducted attack for black, and very well used activity and compensation for the exchange.